I've noticed something about friendships that I don't think people talk about enough. Modern friendships don't usually end with a fight anymore. They don't end with some dramatic fallout or a big betrayal, or a moment where you can clearly say, yeah, that's where it all went wrong. Most of the time, they end in a way that's honestly harder to deal with. They fade. A message gets answered later than usual, plans start getting pushed back, weeks go by where you don't really speak, and then one day you realize that someone you used to consider a close friend is basically gone. Not in a cruel way, just quietly. And what's weird is that this has become so normal that a lot of people don't even treat it like losing a friendship. They just accept it as part of life. Which is why I want to talk about the problem with modern friendships. Because I don't think people today are worse at making friends than what they used to be. I don't think we're more selfish, less loyal, or less caring. I think the real issue is that modern life makes it unbelievably easy for friendships to slowly decay without anyone ever meaning for it to happen. Friendships used to be supported by routine, proximity, and shared environment. Now friendships basically require intentional maintenance, and if you don't actively maintain them, they don't survive. Something I think most people don't realize is that friendships are often held together by structure, school being the obvious example. You see the same people every day, so friendships almost form automatically. But even outside of school, there were a lot of built-in systems that keep people connected. Neighborhoods used to feel more communal, people worked in person more often, there were more clubs, local communities, sport teams, and social spaces where people could regularly show up. And what that did was create repeated exposure. You'd see the same people over and over, and eventually you'd start talking. Then you'd start joking around, and then you'd start hanging out. And before you know it, you're close friends. The important part is that it didn't require much effort. Friendships were basically built into life, but modern life isn't like that. Now people move cities constantly, change jobs, study online, or work remotely. And most people spend a lot more time inside than they realize. So friendship isn't built into the structure of life anymore. It's something you have to actively create. Another thing I've noticed is that friendships used to be based on proximity. Now it's based on convenience. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I think it's just how things naturally turned out. Technology has made communication easy. So now if I want to keep a friendship alive, I don't need to call someone. I don't need to go see them. I can just send them a message. Or send them a meme. Or react to the Instagram story. And that's convenient, obviously. But it also lowers the standards for what counts as maintaining a friendship. Because it gives you this feeling like you're still connected, even when you haven't actually had a real conversation in months. This is where I think social media has changed friendships in a way people don't really talk about. Because now, I can know what someone is doing without ever speaking to them. I can know who they're dating, what they're eating, where they've traveled, what their opinions are, and what music they've listened to. And because of this information, my brain kind of assumes that the relationship is still alive. But knowing information about someone isn't really the same as being close to them. And I think this is one of the reasons modern loneliness feels so strange. Because you can feel socially connected, while being emotionally disconnected. You can feel like you have friends, while also feeling like you have nobody. And that's what's really uncomfortable. Because it makes it hard to explain what's really missing. What makes modern friendships particularly fragile is that they rarely end with conflict. They end with neglect. And I don't even mean that in a cruel way. Usually nobody is trying to hurt anyone. It's more like everyone gets busy, everyone gets distracted, and the friendships just start slipping. One person doesn't respond, the other person assumes they're annoying, and then they don't respond. The conversation stops, weeks go by, then months. And at some point, it becomes awkward to reach out again. And that's honestly one of the weirdest parts about adulthood. There are friendships that end, not because you dislike the person, but because you waited too long. And then it feels like you missed your chance. And I think a lot of it comes down to energy. People always say, I've been busy. But if I'm being honest, I don't think busy is always the right word. I think people are just drained. Modern life takes out a lot from people. Work is stressful, money is stressful, social media is overstimulating. Everyone feels like they're behind, everyone feels like they should be doing more. And when you live in that mindset, friendships start to feel like another responsibility, even though friendships are supposed to be that one thing that makes life feel less heavy. But when you're mentally exhausted, even seeing a friend can feel like a lot of effort. So people start postponing it, and then they postpone it more, and eventually the friendship fades. This is another part I think that is uncomfortable to admit. Friendship has become more transactional. Not in the obvious using each other way, but in a subtle cultural way. Modern culture is obsessed with optimization. Everyone is optimizing their fitness, their money, productivity, aesthetic, career, and social status. And I think friendship has become affected by that too. Some people only stay close to people who feel relevant to their current lifestyle. If you're not in the same stage of life, if you're not partying anymore, if you're not going out anymore, if you're not doing something exciting, you slowly become less included. And again, I don't think most people do this consciously, but it's happening. And it makes friendships feel less stable, because it starts to feel like you have to be entertaining to be valued. And that's not what friendships are supposed to be. Friendship is supposed to be the one and only relationship in your life where you don't have to perform. Another thing I've realized is that a lot of people don't really have a friend group. They have social circles, and those are different. Essentially, a social circle is basically a group of people who see each other because of a shared environment, whether that be university, work, the gym, parties, or online spaces. But that doesn't automatically mean that those people will be there for you. A real friend is someone you can talk to when you're not doing well, someone you can call when something's happening, someone you can be honest around without feeling like you have to act a certain way. And I think this is where the problem of modern loneliness comes from, because people can appear socially connected, but still feel emotionally unsupported. And I think a lot of people realize this too late. They realize it when they actually go through something hard, and suddenly notice how few people they actually have. So if I had to summarize the problem, I'd like to say this. Modern friendships feel less secure. They feel temporary, they feel conditional. And when friendships feel conditional, people stop being vulnerable. They stop reaching out, they stop opening up. And then the friendship becomes surface level, which makes them easier to lose. And it then turns into a cycle where people want deeper friendships, but the culture, it encourages shallow ones. And I think this is why so many people feel socially anxious now. Not because they hate people or are scared of people, but because they don't know where they stand. They don't know who really cares, they don't know who's genuine. And when you don't feel socially secure, you start protecting yourself emotionally, which ironically makes friendships even weaker and harder to form. Now, obviously, I don't think the solution is just to try harder. That's not realistic. But I do think there are a few things that can actually work. The first is consistency. Friendships don't survive off occasional catch-up. They survive off routine. If you see someone once every 6 months, the relationship will always feel distant. The second is initiative. Modern culture teaches people to be passive socially. Everyone waits to be invited, everyone waits to be messaged first. And that's understandable, because nobody wants to feel needy. But if everyone is waiting, nothing ever happens. The third is creating shared habits. I think this is one of the most underrated solutions. Having something consistent like going gym together, having coffee every Sunday, or having a gaming night. It sounds simple, but it creates stability. And the last thing is vulnerability. Not in an emotional oversharing way, but in a real way. Actually telling your friends that you're stressed, admitting that you're struggling, and actually being honest that you miss them. Because if nobody ever says anything real, the friendship stays shallow. And shallow friendships are easy to lose. At the end of the day, I don't think modern friendships are weaker because the people are worse. I think modern friendships are weaker because modern life is designed in a way that makes connection harder to sustain. We have fewer shared environments, less routine, less community, and fewer natural opportunities to repeatedly see the same people. So friendship becomes something you have to actively maintain. And if you don't, it fades quietly, without drama, without closure. Which is honestly the worst way to lose someone, because it makes you wonder whether it was ever real. And I think the main point I want to leave this video with is that modern friendships don't usually end because people stop caring. They end because life makes caring inconvenient. And if you want meaningful friendships, you almost have to fight against that. Anyways, thanks for watching.